it does feel like it's going to create more and more quality matchups, which that aspect is going to be absolutely awesome. But I think coaches, they're somewhat going to be pulling their hair out, man. Some of these schedules are going to be just freaking gauntlets, which Oklahoma fans know all about these first 2 years in the SEC, but it's not going to get any easier with the additional conference game and then that Big Ten crossover game year in, year out.
Hey, and interestingly enough, while we've been rolling here, Joe C. sent out an email after
I saw that.
Yeah, after some of the open records requests were granted, and you kind of see where softball is and ticket sales, and you learn buyouts for coaches. But I think it's also a reminder that, hey, you've got a big deal coming up here, and you've told us what, March 14th is
no April.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I believe it's April 7th.
April 7th, right?
The House case.
Yeah, it's the big day for the House case. Yeah. Everyone's talking. Everyone's trying to figure out what's the best way to go about it. Which direction you're going to go? How are we going to minimize expenses and also maximize the opportunities for student athletes and for the best availability of resources and success. The new rev share is it's gonna be a good thing, but it's also going to be a challenge, I think, to navigate for a few years.
There's no doubt. I mean, it's going to be very expensive. Up to $20.5 million is going to have to now, be put into a new bucket and be created. And obviously, we saw the SEC distributions. I think was it $53 million this first year, and those numbers continue to go up and up every year you're within the deal. But yeah, there's no doubt, man. There's going to be a lot of bean counters paying attention to all the money coming in, going out, and making sure that all these various departments, and especially the athletic department, it's got the proper funding. So yeah, I have not had a chance to completely read through that, but I did see that email pop up in my inbox as well here this morning. It's fascinating times, that's for sure. And especially, I'm sure you guys have probably talked about the Ross Dellinger piece that was out.
Honestly, we haven't, because we were saving it to go in depth with you. We were complaining about the weather. We talked breakfast, and KJ came on with us. So we've been waiting for you to get into this because it is fascinating. And I think the coolest part of it all, Dusty, beyond the playoff expansion, is a series with the Big Ten in football. So you have 9 conference games now, and you would have a scheduling agreement with the Big Ten teams, plural, is at least the way it's looking, right?
Yeah, so first of all, it looks like we're going to 14 or 16 teams. That seems pretty inevitable based off the reporting by Ross from these conversations from the SEC and the Big Ten. And this is the new 6-year playoff that starts in 26 and goes through 31. And within that, like the rev distribution, I was looking at it this morning. I mean, it is massively skewed in favor of the Big Ten, the SEC, and they have much more power that they yield. And so they're going to be calling the shots on this thing. And it sounds like the one thing I don't like about it's the automatic qualifiers.
I don't either.
It sounds like this is mainly for a 14. It's going to be a 4-4 SEC Big Ten get 4 automatic qualifiers into the playoff, guaranteed 4 spots. The Big 12 and the ACC would get 2 apiece, which that would put you at 12 of those. You would have 1 for the group of 5 and 1 at large, and probably a decent chance that Notre Dame is going to be that at large, at least a decent representative amount of times in that scenario. It was interesting, if you go within this piece that Dellinger put out, you look back at the history of this playoff to this point. We're going into the 12th year, so we have 11 years of data from this playoff. And with the committee, if you go back through those 11 years, the SEC has had on average 4.7 teams in the top 14 that would have qualified. The Big Ten 4.6. And this is with the new landscape. This isn't where they were, but where, relative to where they are now. And so Oklahoma, Texas, they obviously count for the SEC, Washington, Oregon, Big Ten, so on and so forth. With the Big 12, it was 2.1. The ACC was 1.8. And so, like, you could kind of argue that the SEC and the Big Ten, they might be leaving a little something on the table there with, only guaranteeing 4. I just, because this is my whole thing, is I think most years it works itself out. You get 4 in anyway. But what if you don't one year?
Right.
Like, I hate that it's like, well, this league's getting this many, this league's getting that many. Like, yeah, it's probably going to work out that way anyway. Why don't we just let it play out that way? And I guess on some level, you take the power out of the committee's hand, and now you put the onus on the conference, and you say, okay, you got 2 spots, you got 4 spots, you got 4, you got 2. Figure out how you want to bring, how you want to bring to the table your 4 schools, and then let's go have a playoff. That's the only part I don't like, and I feel kind of dumb playing. I sometimes feel smart, and sometimes I feel dumb. And you had just asked me, I think it was last week.
Right.
Or 2 weeks ago, whenever it was, that you asked me the question, do you think that we get to 9 conference games? And I said, no, I don't. And I said, no, I don't, because we just heard them talk about strength of schedule and how that wasn't part of the equation for the committee to the level that, definitely Greg Sankey and the SEC wanted it to be. And to me, that's why you're seeing these automatic qualifiers. And that's why the 9-game schedule's coming in. Because basically just saying that now it doesn't matter how hard or how many more maybe additional losses you get. We're getting 4 no matter what. So guess what it means? More money. Because that additional conference game is going to generate more revenue, which then you also referenced the crossover with the Big Ten. That's going to create additional revenue. And so the SEC's deal, already good, it's going to get even better. There's going to be even more money flowing in to the conference and to these individual 16 schools as well. And I'll be completely honest, we win as fans because that's going to create that many more quality matchups. Now, there's probably some football coaches that don't love it, Plank, because guess what? That's going to make for even tougher schedules. That's going to make for even, tougher games week in, week out, which if you're just talking about, the big scale college football fan, what do we want to see? We want to see great matchups, right? We want to see compelling games, competitive games. That's great. But now if you narrow it down into your individual school, it's going to make the path and it's going to make, just week in, week out that much more tougher. So you can look at it through different lenses, but it sure feels like here, they said as soon as the next handful of weeks, we could see this, continue to gain more and more steam and somewhat be put into motion for that 2026 through 2031 season.
Dusty, I would just have to think that the revenue sharing era has expedited some of this. Yeah. How much do you think, trying to find more money quickly was a part of this maybe happening so rapidly?
I think it's a big part, Josh. Smarter people than me always tell me follow the money. It's honestly not that it's the right thing. It's just the reality. It's what's fueling a lot of decisions. It's what it has for a while. I think ever since it became pretty clear that we were going to get to this place that's going to happen April 7th, and athletic departments, universities would have to be ponying up money and paying athletes. When that became very clear, and I think you can take that back to the Supreme Court. What is that, the Alston case, I believe, Plank? That was kind of that initial piece.
Yeah.
That when it was 9-0, and I believe it was Judge Kavanaugh, and some of the things, you go back and read and look at what he had to say and basically call the NCAA un-American to surmise a piece of it. You kind of knew this day was coming, and I think that smart places like Oklahoma, like Texas, they knew it, and they said, and I think people started to realize we've got to put ourselves in position to be financially flush. And I think that there's a multitude of reasons that fueled this move to the SEC, and this is one of them.
Right.
And so, yeah, Josh, I think that these decisions, this change, and the 9-game schedule, and the crossover with the Big Ten that's going to create additional. Yeah, I think a lot of this is fueled by money, but I think a lot of decisions for a while now have been fueled by money. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, it's the wrong thing. It's just what it is. Like this has become a more so and more so and more so a massive, massive industry that is a business. And in business, man, you've got to make sure your financial house is in order. And I think we're continuing to see that. And with these, we're going to see what all schools, what all conferences are able to opt in. We know Oklahoma and the SEC schools are going to be one of those because they're in a financial good situation to pay these athletes and maximize that $20.5 million that we're going to see. And they're going to just continue. I think you're going to continue to see these conferences and these universities try to find as many revenue streams as they can. And it's just going to be the future of what this college model is going to look like.
Yeah. And I think just one final thought on it before we talk about the scheduling piece a little bit more in depth, Dusty. I think that everyone is kind of working to try to figure it out. I don't think there is a plan where anyone's like, yeah, this is the way to do it. I mean, Kirby Hocutt came out and said, here's how we're going to divide it up. Well, that led, from what I've been told from people in Lubbock, to kind of a World War III within the athletic department. It's like, wait, hold on. What percentage are they getting and where not? So, yeah, I don't think anyone has a good feel on it right now.
No, they don't. It's as clear as mud. And it's probably going to be – it's going to take a little time to figure it out. Like, I still don't even – I mean, I don't. A lot of people don't like this $20.5 million.
True.
How's it going to be allocated? Who's making the decisions on how it's allocated? You know, we've heard – I saw from one judge, Title IX is going to come into effect. So does that mean it's got to be even? Does that mean that 10.25 goes to male sports, 10.25 goes to female sports? And I've asked these questions to people, and I think there's a lot of people that don't fully know.
Yeah.
And then that gets back to, well, does that mean that at some point that we see a branch off? There's still a lot of questions, but they've got to. There's just certain hurdles you have to get to, cross that before you can get to the next, right? And there's still a long way to figure out exactly how this functions, what it looks like, and exactly what it is. The other thing, my question is, Plank, is like collectives.
Where they go?
So what and how are collectives going to function? You know, because technically, if you read like the what's been put out, now what would be considered an NIL deal outside of the university is supposed to be a true marketing advertising deal. And any deal over $650 has to be reported. We've also seen reports that, the Power Four conferences want there to be some governing body that's not the NCAA, that they're going to appoint some CEO to oversee that. That's going to be an arm that is going to regulate all that happens. Well, what is that like? So are collectives going to continue to function? Are they going to become advertising and or marketing groups that come up with different, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just, there's a lot that I'm sure Kirby was talking about when he was talking about Texas Tech. And I just think that the more people I talk to, no one knows exactly what this is going to look like and exactly what's going to hold up in court. I just know that the next big thing that needs to happen is this House case needs to be settled, and they need to try to figure out exactly how this money that's coming from the athletic department is going to be distributed, what sports are going to be able to benefit, and kind of what that structure looks like. I know that's a lot of jargon, but I think it just kind of illustrates, Chris, just this is multifaceted. There's a lot of different layers that come with it, and everybody's trying to get their arms wrapped around exactly what this is and what it's going to look like moving forward.
Dusty, with the Big Ten and SEC working so closely together, it appears, right?
Yeah.
If you're the Big 12 and the ACC, do you work out a scheduling agreement tomorrow?
I mean, I think you should. I think you should be trying to do whatever you can to create, quality games, matchups. Now, the thing with that is you would want and hope that also comes with additional revenues for you, right? Because that's the big part of why the Big Ten, I think the SEC are doing that. It's going to create more matchups, and it's going to, be able to take to their television partners and garner more revenue. Can you get that if you're the Big 12 and the ACC? ESPN solely owns well, I guess they've sold off some like CW, but for the most part, they have the ACC their rights. The Big 12 is split. Some goes to Fox, some goes. ESPN's got a little bit bigger piece of the pie, but Fox still has a decent piece. Are those TV partners willing to pay that? And again, I hate to keep keeping about money because at some point we all just want to see the product on the field. Like we just want to watch football, we want to enjoy it. We want to root for our teams, we want to see good competitive college football. All right, that's what we want. But I just think that to answer that question, yes, if I'm Brett Yormark, Big 12 commissioner, if I'm Jim Phillips, I'm trying to find any possible way, just like Greg Sankey of the SEC, just like Tony Petitti, the Big Ten, additional dollars to flow into my conferences and into my schools. And if a scheduling agreement between those two leagues can create that, 100%.
Yeah.
I'm sprinting to the door to try to make that happen. I just, I don't know exactly what that looks like because there's probably, another element that says, well, if it's not going to translate into more money, why should we schedule, make our schedules that much more difficult? But at the same time, if you're guaranteed certain spots and the conference is going to determine, however they decide their tiebreakers, which of those from the conference get those spots, is non-conference going to matter as much, Right. Like if it really just comes back to your conference record and that pecking order within conference, then yeah, that would probably lead to wanting to schedule even tougher. My biggest hope is that we get more and more quality matchups, more and more quality games. But I'll throw this at you, Plank. Like if so this doesn't really apply to Oklahoma currently, but if you're like Florida and you're playing 9 conference games now, and now you're going to also play a 10th game against a Big Ten school. Are you still going to want to – then you're going to have Florida State on the schedule as well?
Probably not. Yeah.
That's 11 Power 4 games.
What did Danny think? Did you guys talk about that?
We did briefly. Yeah. We're both just crossing our fingers hoping that those don't go to the wayside.
I think on my nerdy side too, Dusty, who televises those games? Big Ten is Fox essentially, and they don't have a deal with ESPN anymore.
Correct.
And this SEC is all ESPN, ABC right now. So how will that work? Or is there a platform where it's like welcome to Prime? I'm Dave Pash along with Dusty Dvoracek. Here is the SEC Big Ten Showdown, and there's another entity that jumps in here that. It's a larger money package.
Did you just create me a new?
Gotcha. I'm making
employer?
you Herb Street here, yeah, buddy. I'm gonna get you more money.
By the way, I'll pay the percentage if you can make it happen. You can get yourself a nice little agent fee, but I don't know how that would work, Chris.
Yeah, me neither.
I can assure you of this. Currently, we had this year Wisconsin, Alabama. We'll have Texas, Ohio State next year. Whoever the home team is, Fox or NBC will get that game. Because the other thing about the Big Ten, it's not just Fox.
Right. It's true.
It's CBS.
That's right.
CBS gets that 3:30 game. NBC gets a prime window game. Fox gets their top game, and they have the most inventory because they also own the Big Ten network. But remember, the Big Ten, that was one of the big things before Kevin Warren departed to go to the Bears. They spread their chips around to multi-networks. Like their deal is a multi-network deal, whereas the SEC, it's only an ESPN deal. And so I would think on some level, whatever that arrangement, whatever dollar figure, ESPN, Fox, whoever else at the table puts on it, games that are on Big Ten soil go to that side. Games that are on SEC soil go to the ESPN side. That would be my guess. But if it's also a way that Fox can now, or CBS or NBC, if they can go do games in SEC country, if that could open the door to that, whenever the SEC gets the home games, I'm sure that they would show up at the table with more money. And I agree with you. Being in the TV world, I nerd out on stuff like that. But it does feel like it's going to create more and more quality matchups, which that aspect is going to be absolutely awesome. But I think coaches, they're somewhat going to be pulling their hair out, man. Some of these schedules are going to be just freaking gauntlets, which Oklahoma fans know all about these first 2 years in the SEC. But it's not going to get any easier with the additional conference game and then that Big Ten crossover game year in, year out.
Let's break. Dusty Dvoracek is with us. You guys have great questions on this. We'll dive into those next right here on The Ref. Stick around. All right. Dusty, I got a lot of texts. I know we got a couple of hoops things we want to talk about, but anything else to add in all this?
I do. Josh and I are talking the break, and I'm getting giddy because, this SEC Big Ten, these matchups are already kind of happening. I mentioned Ohio State, Texas. I don't have to remind people probably around here, but week 2, how sweet is it going to be for Michigan coming to Norman, Oklahoma?
The maize and blues are maize and blue. Yeah, sorry. I always can get confused if maize is actually a shade of blue or yellow, but the maize and blue coming to town, it's going to be awesome, dude.
It's going to be incredible. I have not looked at the historical nature of this. Has Michigan ever come to Norman?
I don't believe so. I don't believe so.
That's Sharon Moore comes back home, bringing his team in. Oh, man, that's just going to be –
let's see here.
That's going to be awesome. But I was thinking about –
Dusty, they've only played once, and it was in 1976 in the Orange Bowl.
Oh, wow. Man, that's just going to be – it's going to be fantastic. I was looking at this schedule, though, and I would just think, let's just go – I remember 2 years ago. I'm going to pull up 2023. Okay. This was the home slate for Sooners fans. SMU, which actually won the American that year, but SMU, Iowa State, UCF, West Virginia, TCU. Not a bad home slate, but I remember kind of some moans and groans that year. Arkansas State also on that home slate. I'm going to fast forward to this year. You got Illinois State and Kent State. We'll throw those out. How about Michigan, as I touched on, Auburn coming to Norman, Ole Miss coming to Norman, Missouri makes their way back to Norman, Oklahoma, and LSU. How good is that?
Right.
And I guess I throw this out and I know I'm only on limited time, but maybe we can look at them if we don't have time to look at them today. I'm curious because I know for a long time Oklahoma fans, they get a little frustrated with the lack of great games on the home slate. Right. Do they love this?
They should.
Or do they look at it and they say, God, look at that murderer's row, right? I mean, that's kind of the give take. And I know the Sooner fan says, I love the schedule. We just have to be good enough to win those games and deal with it, right?
Right.
That's the, get my cake and eat it too, right? I mean, that's what you all want. I'm not saying you shouldn't want that, but have you gotten a sense or have you gotten a feel? Are the Sooner fans happy, especially? And last year, it was a quirky deal. The non-conference wasn't very good. You only got 3 true home games because you got screwed the first year. Your other home game was Texas. But this year, you're loaded up, man. I mean, Michigan, Auburn, Ole Miss, Missouri, LSU coming to Norman, Oklahoma. I would have to think Sooners fans got to be fired up now. You got to be ready for that task.
Sure.
Right? But man, that is an awesome home slate of games.
Couldn't ask for anything better, especially for those that were in the I'm tired of it always being Kansas or Kansas State. And
you heard it.
It's awesome. I mean, I think it's great, especially with the amount of money that you're paying for tickets. You want to see good games or at least good opponents, and you're getting them. And by the way, Oklahoma has played these opponents well at home. They beat Alabama last year. Right. They were in. I mean, listen, we can debate about the tight nature of the Tennessee game. I know there's people that want to fight about that, but and OU fans brought it, and I think they'll continue to bring it. It was a great. There wasn't a better road environment that we went to last year than what Oklahoma had for the Tennessee or Alabama game. It was amazing. Yeah.
The one outlier was South Carolina, and I think that as much as anything was the nature.
I forgot about that. I watched that from my mind.
I should not have.
I forgot about that.
I should have brought it up. But I think the way that first 5 minutes went, it kind of took the wind out of everybody's sail. But you're 100% right. I will say that people that I've talked to, and I know other fans, like doing my morning show with Danny, we've had fans call in or I've come across fans out and about. loved their time when they came to Norman, specifically for, I know that Tennessee game. Obviously, fan base got a chance to win, but I think they appreciated the OU fans and just the atmosphere that was provided there at the Palace. So you got an opportunity to show some pretty good fan bases next year what you're made of, and hopefully the team on the field will give you a better representation of Oklahoma football as well.
I think fans want to be excited, Dusty. They certainly were.
Right.
This time a year ago, and even the couple of years building up to this thing where you were jumping into the SEC, there was so much excitement from the fan base. Now the fan base, I think, has been beaten down a little bit, and that's not to say they're not excited for the slate, but I think there's some understandable trepidation with the slate, just given what they've seen from Oklahoma.
Well, here's the reality. Look, in Oklahoma, we'll see what happens. I'm pretty optimistic on John Mateer. Everything I keep hearing is fantastic. I think Ben Arbuckle is going to be a huge improvement, so we'll see. That offense got a chance to really be improved this upcoming season. They got to go do it. I think most of us think the defense is going to be really good next season. Michigan, they're about to lose 4 first-round draft picks. They might be starting a true freshman quarterback coming to Norman. Now, Bryce Underwood's talented. They got question marks. They're not guaranteed them. I think we got a pretty good feel for Auburn's starting quarterback, right? I mean, Jackson Arnold, more than likely, he's going to be leading the Auburn Tigers in here on September 20th. Now, they've got some real talent. They had a talented last 2 recruiting classes for Hugh Freeze. They got a chance to be pretty good, but there's no guarantee they're going to be great. Ole Miss had them multiple times this year. Unbelievably talented. They're losing a ton, guys. Lane Kiffin recruited pretty well. I'd say Oklahoma's recruited better. They got some question marks. There's no guarantee Ole Miss is going to be just a juggernaut next season. Missouri, I think very similar. Eli Drinkwitz has done a nice job. They've done a good job with NIL and been able to attract some good players. They're replacing a quarterback in Brady Cook that's played a lot of football. They're replacing a receiver in Luther Burden that is gone now. They got some question marks. I look at it, and LSU is the one that I feel probably has the best chance. As you look at it on paper going into the season, that's the one you kind of say, oh, I feel pretty confident they're going to be good.
Right.
The other teams, though, I would raise as many questions with those teams I would Oklahoma, right? So, to me, I look at it and I say there's a lot of winnable games you're going to have in your backyard. Are they losable games? No question, but there's not – I don't look at that and just say, oh, man, Oklahoma's in some world of hurt plank. I look at that and say –
let's go.
Let's go.
Yeah.
There's some great opportunity there to win some big-time games in your backyard.
All right, a couple quick texts, and we'll let you get out of here. Dusty Dvoracek is with us. That's Josh on Plank. It's brought to you by Ylla, Gosney Attorney at Law. If college athletics must pay as a business, writes the 405, they should be able to cut pay as a business too. Let players go in the middle of a season if they aren't producing or whatever. It's kind of funny. My wife, who does not follow sports, couldn't care less. I was talking to her about the rev share thing, and that was exactly what she said. She brought up, well, so if they're not producing, can they cut them? It's well, I don't think it really works like that in college, does it? You can process them at the end of the year,
right?
But I don't think you're ever going to see. Well, I never thought we'd see a time whenever players were getting paid, but I don't think we're ever going to see a time where they have a waiver wire like you have in the NFL, unless we get a union.
And that's the thing is okay, if you remove a player, what are you going to do? How are you going to replace that?
Right.
There's not a pool of free agents just sitting out there waiting to be signed. So that in lies the problem. The other part of this too, man, they're not technically employees.
Right.
They're student athletes. This is by request of all the universities. They want to keep their tax exemption, and so they don't want them to be technically employees. These are student athletes, and within that, I would imagine there's some protections to where you can't do that type of thing. So, but yeah, without a pool of players to replace, it's one thing if, you cut a player and you go sign another player. What players would you go sign? And therefore, what's the use of getting rid of a player if you can't replace them and you have to pay them anyway? Like, but I understand the thought process. I think the reality is for a lot of these, and the other part of it that I'm going to find interesting, and I think that this will vary. I think some places, these will be 1-year deals. Other places, they'll be multi-year deals. And, if it is just a 1-year deal and you don't produce and you don't live up to it, then they're going to be looking to allocate that money somewhere else. So you're not going to be let go in season, but at year's end, if they're paying you good coin and you're not living up to it, there's a decent chance you're probably not going to be asked to come back, at least definitely not at that rate.
And I would think if we ever get to the point to where players are let go midseason, at that point, Dusty, then they're just minor league football players. There's no school and academics involved.
Yes, but again, that is not what we're talking about here currently with this house settlement.
That's right. So,
could we get to that place? Sure, but that's not where April 7th, what has already been agreed to in principle and will be signed and put into place less than 2 months from now. That isn't this. Do we get to that? Maybe, but let's see how this first settlement goes before we go there.
You got time for one more?
I got time. I got all the time you need, buddy.
Sean writes, how could you possibly remain eligible academics-wise if you have in-season movement? I know. It's like the whole academic side of it to me. Even guys that go in the portal in April, it's like, what? Do credits just transfer easily anymore? What happened?
Yeah. It's funny. You don't hear about that, right?
No.
You got to find the school where your credits transfer over. Or let me ask this. When was the last time you heard of a player anywhere being academically ineligible?
The only one that we come up with is, I almost said Shedeur Sanders. Who was the OSU quarterback that transferred to Ole Miss and never played?
Spencer Sanders.
He wasn't eligible for their bowl game a couple years ago. That's like the only one I've ever heard of. It just because when I was in college, I tried to look at transferring one time and I just couldn't do it because I'd lose my credit. So I guess it just doesn't exist anymore.
No, it doesn't. I don't want to bring up bad stuff, but I figure I'll mention it. Saturday night was like a freaking. You want to talk about a gut punch?
Ugh.
I was watching on TV and I was actually in the car at the end of the game I'm listening to T-Row and I'm thinking just gonna listen to Oklahoma salt this thing away. I think it was a 5-point lead with
23
I think
seconds left,
25 seconds to play. A 4-point play and then I'm like, what just happened?
Right.
That one hurt, bro.
Well, tonight might hurt too because Florida's really good, but we'll see. Right? Maybe they can
you
turn
never
it around.
know.
You never know. Never know in this league.
Let me ask you this. I know you got to go.
Oh, we're fine.
I saw Lenardi put out his latest yesterday. He still has Oklahoma in.
That's right.
I got to be honest with you. I'm torn on this because you look at the non-conference. That Michigan right now is sitting number 1 in the Big Ten. Mm-hmm. That Michigan win looks that much better. Arizona's number 2 in the Big 12. That win looks that much better. And even that Louisville win, Louisville's going to be one of 3 ACC teams likely to get in. ACC may add a 4th, but Louisville, I believe, 13-2 in ACC play. So, those 3 wins look really good. But then you look at the SEC, and it's just, you're 3-9. I want Oklahoma playing in the NCAA tournament, but, does it feel like they're a tournament team right now, Plank?
No.
Is this just a product of the good teams are playing? 'Cause it doesn't feel like they're playing very good basketball right now.
It's a product of their great start, right, Josh? That's what it is. You hit it on the head, Dusty.
And I think probably for the three of us, though, it's not a part of how the criteria they use to judge these teams. It's that old school mindset of, last 10 is hard for probably the three of us to separate ourselves from. If that was still part of the criteria, then you look at it and you say, no, they're not an NCAA tournament team right now.
Done.
Right.
Done. All right, buddy. Hey, have a great rest of your Tuesday. Stay warm. Don't get out if you don't have to.
I'm
That's
with
the
you
key
on
for
that.
today. All right, buddy.
Stay warm. Be safe. We'll
Talk
see
to you tomorrow.